Hi, my name is Jenica Perez, and I'm presenting on the career of psychologist. This is something that I plan to do when I'm done my bachelor's degree, is to go on to graduate school, and I'd like to get my PhD, preferably. So, in terms of working environment, psychologists typically work in offices. There are some who work in places like prisons and schools or hospitals, but typically speaking, they work in non-hazardous conditions, in clean conditions, and they work typical business hours, generally speaking. It's a sedentary job, a lot of sitting involved, and a lot of one-on-one contact, and it's important for a psychologist to be able to keep very confidential information private, as well as to be able to work in a multidisciplinary setting if needed. For example, they could work with occupational therapists, physiotherapists, doctors, teachers, schools, parents. So there's it's a very diverse group of people it might be working with. It's important for a psychologist to be able to keep their records organized, and psychologists write a lot of reports, and so for those to be organized as well, for anybody who needs to see those. A typical stressor for a psychologist include workload. Sometimes they can have a lot of workload, especially if they're working with a lot of patients. If they're working for companies, there's completion times that are due. That can be stressful if they have a lot of patients. But I think the biggest one for a psychologist is just the nature of the job, listening to everybody's problems and trying to sort those out for people, and that can be exhausting. So vicarious trauma, exhaustion, things like that can be difficult for a psychologist. Now, psychologist benefits can vary. If a psychologist is working for themselves or as a business owner, or working for a small company that doesn't provide benefits, sometimes there are no benefits involved. If they work for the government, there can be pensions, great benefits, good pay. So it just varies on what they're doing and who they're working for. But typically, a psychologist gets better benefits than most typical jobs. A common job task for a psychologist is psychotherapy, teaching, sometimes supervising is involved, report writing, working with other people if necessary, depending if they're doing private practice or working as a part of a multidisciplinary team. So those would be typical tasks. Now, an educational requirement for a psychologist is typically a master's degree. Now, to be considered a psychologist, some states and provinces in Canada say a master's degree you can be certified as a psychologist. Others say you do need a PhD. So it depends on where you're going and what you're looking to do. Someone with a master's in psychology can work in a counseling setting. Now, psychologists, there's a lot of areas they can go into. They can focus on occupational rehabilitation, but also there's a lot of lateral movement, specifically in academia or administration, private practice, working as part of a prison or a hospital team, working in school setting. In terms of salary range, it kind of depends on where you are. I think it's probably lower in the States, but I'm reporting in Canadian dollars because that's where I am. So a non-licensed psychologist is probably looking at $70,000 a year. If it's a private practice and you're not getting a lot of clients, it can be lower than that. But typically $70,000. If you're licensed, you're looking at about $90,000 starting. After a few years of experience, a psychologist can usually make over $120,000. The person I consulted with said, as a business owner, in the type of work he's doing, it's reasonable to expect to make over $200,000 a year. So again, depending on what you're looking at doing, there's a grand salary range, but it has a good salary outlook. I think that's all the information that I need to present to you, so thank you. Have a good day.